The BearCat is an armored police vehicle that has been thrust into the world spotlight. You've likely seen them in the news and heard some angry talking heads saying that they're either great for your community's safety or they're the very end of civilization as we know it. So what is the BearCat and why was it invented? How do police use it around the world, and is there a man-bear-cat version? That's what we all want to know. Well, it's based on the Ford F550 Super Duty chassis and has enough engine power to make the biggest truck enthusiast blush. Police all over the world have deployed the BearCat to try to deter recent riots. Some people took one look at the vehicle and called it an abuse of police power, and claimed it's clearly excessive use of force, while others see the BearCat as a necessity in the modern world that makes every situation safer for all involved. In this video, I want to take a closer look at this BearCat vehicle and how law enforcement have used it as a riot control tool. Why do police need the BearCat? Well, a better question might be, why aren't all police cars bulletproof in the first place? And the answer, it's sadly the fact that it's incredibly costly to outfit all vehicles with bulletproof windows or door features. It also would add a ton of weight to police cruisers, which would become costly when you consider that done at scale. The heavy vehicles would require more gasoline, more maintenance for the stress that it's put on the suspension of the vehicle, and most police cars really never have to fend off incoming bullets anyway, so is it worth it? Well, prior to 2001, even SWAT vehicles were not bulletproof. They were basically ice cream trucks carrying elite police instead of candy cigs. You remember those, don't you? I know I do, that's why I vape like a complete loser now. In 1997, during the North Hollywood shootout, the LAPD actually had to go and take control of an armored cash delivery truck because they didn't have any armored vehicles themselves. There was no other way to safely extract wounded civilians. Now, of course, people would point out the fact that, where do you draw the line there? Should we give police fighter jets too? The shootout in LA signaled a change for law enforcement. Criminals were beginning to up their game, showing up with body armor and high-powered weapons. In August 2001, the Massachusetts-based company called Lenco Industries created the first version of the vehicle with input from the Los Angeles County Sheriff Department. They saw the problems that police officers were starting to face in the early 2000s, and they created the BearCat in response. If you show up at the scene of the crime and all you know is a suspect is armed and dangerous, do you want to roll up in a police cruiser that offers zero protection? That's right, police cars are as bulletproof as my 2006 Toyota Camry. There's a big misconception that cars in general are any kind of bulletproof. We can thank Hollywood for that. If you're behind a car door, you might as well be behind a sheet of tinfoil. In 2014, two cops were sitting in their parked car in New York City when an attacker fired into their car, straight into the car, through the window, with a pistol, and it struck both officers, killing them, sadly. And this is just one of many instances where bulletproof vehicles could have prevented unnecessary loss of life. So the BearCat is made of an all-steel armor construction, right? It's got 1.5-inch steel armor, which is rated to take an incoming 50 BMG round. It has a 6.7 power-stroke V8 turbo diesel engine with a 4x4 all-wheel drive. It's got 440 horsepower and 2,800 RPM. This vehicle can hit a top speed of 90 miles per hour on the highway, which is very fast for an armored truck, and it's an absolute necessity given how many highway chases actually end up ending with BearCats being called in. There are a number of law enforcement versions, including 2-door and 4-door. They can fit 12 fully equipped police officers in the back of the vehicle. It weighs a nice 17,500 pounds, and it costs about $300,000 for your police department to acquire. Before you go complaining about how expensive that is, take one look at how expensive it is when an officer is killed on duty. One of the most interesting versions of the BearCat is the border surveillance one, which is outfitted with mobile ground radar surveillance technology. This equipment has software-driven sensors that automatically detect motion across 358 degrees. Not sure what happened to those other 2 degrees. It has thermal image sensors for detecting heat signatures. You can slap on a battering ram onto the BearCat or a winch that can raise officers up into an elevated second-story window, maybe an aircraft. Lenco has made more than 5,000 of these armored trucks for police forces around the world. So I can see where that sounds intimidating and menacing, but it's actually all toothless. When you think about it, these vehicles are harmless. It comes with no weapon system, which is part of the reason police argue it's for everyone's safety. State police famously rode in on the BearCat when they... BearCat. That would be a different vehicle for a beer run. I'll take 2 of those. So when they found the Boston Marathon bomber, they rolled in on the BearCat. They even used an arm attachment to help lift the tarp that was concealing him. So in instances like this, the police claim that the bulletproof vehicle actually helps keep the entire public safe and your community safe. The BearCat is most widely used by Special Weapons and Tactics teams, SWATs. Those are the elite of the police forces who are called in to the most dangerous of situations. It's already been credited with saving the lives of multiple police officers. In Athens, Texas, 2010, during a standoff, this man unloaded his AK-47 rifle at them. Sorry, AK-74 rifle. The round struck the BearCat, but didn't penetrate any of the windows or doors. Then again in 2012, another armored BearCat was hit with 28 rounds while it was perfectly fine. Meanwhile, 2 police cars were turned into Swiss cheese. Their computer in there was just destroyed, completely totaled these cars by gunfire. One of the most famous instances of a BearCat being called in and applied correctly for its intended use was in 2012 during the Pulse nightclub shooting, which I think is the worst mass shooting of all time in the United States. And so it was done in this crowded nightclub in Florida, and SWAT officers responded and attempted to blow a hole in the bathroom wall to enter the club, but they weren't able to do that. So they thought, all right, what are we gonna do? They got the BearCat to ram into the building, successfully breached the wall. Then 11 officers poured into the club and threw flashbangs in to distract the attacker. He fired at the officers, then they put him down with 150 shots in his direction, taking him out. They were able to neutralize the threat in part thanks to the help of the BearCat. Unfortunately, the attacker was able to kill 49 people in that incident, but imagine how much worse it would have been without the BearCat. Critics of the BearCat say the vehicle adds to the friction between police and rioters and protesters, and it's seen as an escalation. The Obama administration, for instance, placed limits on what type of gear the police could use. The police say in response that they already have it covered. One officer, Connolly, said, quote, "We have very strict policies about its use. It will not be used in civil response." Another detective, Greg Wilking from Salt Lake City Police Department, had a different approach, saying, quote, "We are trying to handle it at the lowest level possible, but our safety is paramount." So you see here the response is different based on the state, which makes sense because, in the United States, we have a very vast differences in locations and threats, and so it might make sense for some police departments and not for others. So some people feel as though the BearCat is unnecessary and overkill, and others see it as not being enough. Because there's some police departments that, for instance, are using, in Binghamton, they were using a bread truck for their SWAT team beforehand. Let me know what you think. Should police have the BearCat or not? Or maybe a third option that's somewhere in between, a kind of a compromise? So I'm your host, Chris Cappy. Thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe and watch one of the other videos while you're here.